Did you know that neurodiverse teams are 30% more productive? They are more profitable, they are more efficient, they are more effective at problem solving and innovation. And it's about time we start talking about what we can do to support these teams to make sure they are performing at their best. So as a quick background, my name is Stephanie Scheller. I run a company called Grow Disrupt, and we design and produce events for ADHD entrepreneurs primarily, which means I've done quite a bit of studying into the ADHD brain, which has led me down the rabbit holes of understanding the neurodiverse brain as a whole a lot better than I think most people do. It helps that I have ADHD, and most of my team of 9 is neurodivergent. So as a quick caveat before I get into this, I do want to clarify that every single neurodivergent individual that you meet is different. They are all going to need different things. They are all going to respond slightly differently, even if they have the same neurodivergency. That is one thing I have learned very clearly because I have multiple people on my team who have what's called AuDHD, which is autism and ADHD blended together. And the individuals on my team who have AuDHD are definitely needing different things from me. Just because you have someone who has the same dyslexia, dyscalculia, autism, ADHD, whatever, doesn't mean they're going to need the exact same thing as the other person on the team who needs the exact same thing. One, part of this comes down to coexisting diagnoses because everyone has a bunch of them. A lot of them we're not even aware of. Part of this comes down to different lived experiences. So it is really, really important to recognize that when you are working with neurodiverse individuals, there are some things that are pretty standard across the board. And then there are some things that it is really helpful to keep in mind only a few people may need. And so your job as a manager of a neurodiverse team is to make sure you are actually understanding what each of your team members needs so you can support them in getting it. Trust me, the team will be so much better for it, and so will your entire life. So one of the first things to recognize when you are working with a neurodiverse team is that a lot of neurodiverse individuals are more sensitive to their surroundings than a neurotypical individual is. So giving them some space to help them set up their surroundings, their space to work for them a little bit better can go a long ways with helping them perform better. This can come down to stuff as simple as avoiding overhead lights if at all possible, or letting them offset overhead lights by having extra lighting on their desk, in their cubicle, or in their office. I have lighting along the back wall that bounces off the wall to diffuse shadows and help eliminate some of the strain that can come from harsh overhead lights. If possible, again, avoiding fluorescent lights is super helpful because fluorescent lights not only have a flicker associated with them, there's actually a little bit of a buzz behind them that neurodivergent individuals oftentimes will pick up on, even subconsciously, and it will create both eye strain, ear strain, and mental strain that then pulls them away from being able to peak perform for you. Fidgets. This is one that I see a lot of individuals get very frustrated over, a lot of, especially management and leaders. This could be in small business, but this could also be inside of corporate. And I will encourage you to, if you have neurodiverse members on your team, let them get some quiet fidgets. Now, the key needs to be quiet fidgets. They can't have stuff that is popping and clacking and making all kinds of noises that is distracting. But there are a lot of quiet fidgets out there that they can have. And one of the reasons that this is super important is that a lot of neurodiverse individuals live inside a realm of either permanent overstimulation or understimulation. We're either one or the other almost all the time. And when we're in either one, it's really, really hard to focus. Especially when we are in meetings, we often fall into understimulation. And so we have a hard time staying focused in the meeting to actually recall what we were being talked about. So allowing them to bring in, even if it's just a fidget pen that creates some tactile stimulation for them, can go a long way. Next up, with whatever flexibility, give them permission to control the sound in their area. So whether that is allowing them to use ambient noise earplugs, they make noise or earplugs that are designed to block out ambient noise but still let in voices, or that is letting them use headphones, but allowing them to control the sound a little bit so that they can put on one that supports their focus, or that at least limits the distractions that are pulling on their brain that maybe isn't already great at staying focused when there is a lot of external stimulation going on. Time management tips. So just like I started the very beginning talking about, it's really important that you are able to help your team members who are neurodivergent find the tools that work for them. So you may have a neurodivergent individual that time blocking just does not work for them. Don't force that down their throat. Encourage them to give it a try, give it a solid try, maybe start small, block 15 minutes and try and build the muscle. But if it's not working for them, trying to force them to keep doing it is probably not going to get anywhere. So encourage them to keep finding new time management tools until they find the tool set that does work for them. A few that tend to work across the board is one, plan time for breaks and have your team members plan time for breaks as well. Especially neurodivergent individuals, we tend to work until our brains are kind of at a breaking point. But then once we reach that breaking point, it's really hard to backtrack from that and get back into productivity for the rest of the day. Next up, as often as possible, have set working hours and be respectful of their time off. Don't ask them or expect them to be replying to emails or getting involved with work during downtime, because if you want them to be 100% focused on work during work time, let them have their downtime too. And in fact, you may even have to encourage them to do this, especially if you live inside of a corporate world where that is not necessarily the norm, but you can reiterate it again and again that you want them focused on work when they're at work and home when they're at home, and help them build that boundary. It will help them eliminate the distractions that rise because they know when they're at work, they're supposed to be focusing just at work. Start time, stop time, off time, be clear about where everything falls. Next up, communicating. I'm a big advocate of, if you are a manager or a leader of any capacity, you should understand some kind of communication style or skill. So I personally am trained in something called DISC. I also have certifications in driving forces, emotional quotient, and acumen from a program called TTI. I've chosen these ones because I particularly like the science that TTI puts into making sure everything is really solid, but find a science-based communication style tool that works for you and then study that. Because every single person on your team, and this goes well beyond neurodivergence, like every single person on your team has a different style of communication. They are going to communicate differently and they want to be communicated with differently. If you as the manager can flex your style just a little bit to match them where they're at or meet them where they are at, you make it that much easier for them to do better at their job because they're having to work less hard to communicate with you. And this is part of your job as the manager. I also recommend, in this same type of vein, start to learn about learning styles and understand, like, what does someone need in order to be able to learn? Like, what kind of clarifications are they going to need? Are they a tactile learner? Are they a visual learner? Are they an auditory learner? Make sure that they have some sort of learning process that helps them. Next up, set reminders to praise your team regularly. Now, this is particularly important if you are like neurodivergent yourself, but I do think that we tend to not praise our teams very with enough frequency. We have a tendency, at least I have a tendency, to be like, well, if I'm not getting on you, then you're doing great. Like, that's not how that works. And I think that comes from a lot of different directions. Part of that comes from our own experience with, like, maybe we aren't getting a ton of praise from our bosses, but if you will take time to actually actively seek out and send praise to your team and just say, hey, I love how you did A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Be specific with it as much as you can, as opposed to just being like, you're a great member of the team. Like, that doesn't mean anything. They want to know what it is that you actually felt like they did well. And if you will plan time to actively make sure you are hitting that for them, trust me, one thing that we do know about neurodivergent individuals is they're incredibly loyal. So if you take care of them, they will 100% take care of you, as long as they feel taken care of. And you giving them a little extra praise goes a long ways. Side note there's also something called a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you've got a team member that is doing something good, encourage them to do more of that good thing by praising them for doing that thing. Next up, when you are running a meeting, have an agenda and release it in advance as much as possible, and then follow that agenda. One, it helps a lot of individuals who are neurodivergent to know what is coming. They feel a little bit less off balance. Their brain is then looking for mile markers, so they are staying engaged a little bit more. And it just helps them organize meetings in their brain a little bit more. And yes, this does require you to do a little bit of planning and have an agenda, but it can actually go a long ways for helping your team members stay more engaged and bring better ideas to the table as well. Because a lot of times individuals who are neurodivergent need a little bit more time to come up with creative ideas. They like to think in advance so they can bring something to the table that they have kind of thought through a little bit more. They don't tend to think off the cuff as much. So giving them a little bit of heads up goes a long ways. Lastly, make sure you have a regularly scheduled space for them to bring up issues. This is one of the reasons that I encourage one-on-ones. If you have team members, you should be meeting with them at least once a month, if not once a week, in a structured space where they can bring up issues, where you can talk through work that they're doing, where they can ask for help, where you can tell them what you are needing them to do, where you can bring up issues if they are not hitting things out of the park. So do yourself a favor. As frustrating as it can be sometimes, schedule one-on-ones at a consistent time and day. Pick a time and day that doesn't tend to get disrupted and schedule your one-on-ones at that time, at that day. And then at the very least, every single week you should cover, what are you working on? What do you need help with? Here's what I need from you. And if your meeting takes less than 30 minutes and you got it blocked for 30 minutes, wrap the meeting early. You don't have to fill the 30 minutes, but you should have that structured space. They should have a space where they do feel safe coming to you to talk about issues. Because trust me, they will not bring them up on their own until it is too late. Neurodiverse teams are phenomenal. Just like every team, they come with strengths, they come with challenges, but if you will put just a little extra work into managing your team really well, it will make a world of difference. You will see things improving for the company, for your department, for whatever it is you are working towards. You'll see the return in spades, and you will have a team that will bend over backwards. If you take care of them, they will want to take care of you too.